All right. Welcome. Happy Columbus Day Part 2. My name is 12 Gauge. I am your host. I decided to get on here and do the audio Down the Hill podcast. I don't know what I did just then. But like I was saying, my name is 12 Gauge. I am your host, and this is 12 Gauge Investigative. Wanted to get on here today and do the audio podcast of Down the Hill, the Dephi case, to give people who have not followed this the opportunity to listen to this to get acclimated with the case. So let's go ahead and begin. I don't have a lot of time, but I have enough to spend some time with you guys. So hope you enjoy it. Let's do this.
In their comments and the way they looked and the way they acted and the way they walked, and because
if you want to see some of the people and places we're talking about in the show, visit our website, downthehillpodcast.com.
What did you see when you got out here that day?
Well, there was a lot happening at that time. There was still a huge response from this local community, which, by the way, is just really is an extraordinary place. There was a flurry of law enforcement activity from agencies all over, as people would expect, and as we've come to expect internally. And I could just see the complexity of people's faces and in their comments and the way they looked and the way they acted and the way they walked, and because it rocked this community. And remember, it was on the heels of the Flora fire that killed those 4 little girls in Flora, in the same county, in the same rural county in middle of America, So
It's a lot of tragedy.
There's a lot of tragedy, a lot of sadness, a lot of hurt, pain, and sorrow. And I knew we were going to have a heavy burden. I just knew we were going to have a heavy burden. Part of that was because of what the expectations would be. Coordinating an event, an investigation of this that's this complex. I had a lot spinning around in my mind, personally, in my mind. But as I looked around and I saw what was happening, I knew that we were up for the task.
There's a difference between up for the task and ready for the task. 24 hours after Abigail Williams and Liberty German went missing, what Doug Carter and his officers were about to see and learn, well, years later, it still keeps them up at night. Near the waters of Deer Creek in Delphi, less than a quarter mile from the bridge, Libby's sister Kelsey hears searchers discover a black Nike shoe, the same kind Libby had been wearing the day before. Seconds later, in a ravine filled with leaves, volunteers in the search party find 2 bodies.
Police are also examining this Snapchat photo. It was taken just before both girls disappeared.
I made the announcement that the girls have been found and it was not to a good end.
We are investigating this as...
Okay, so the photo that they're referring to has been the famous photo that I showed this morning in the Delphi video. If you didn't watch that one, you can go back in my library. It should be the last one in line, or the first one in line, whichever way you're looking at it. I think everybody understands which one it is. It's the picture of the large, heavier man with the blue coat and tan hat, and he's kind of hunched over, boots, blue jeans.
It's a crime scene. We suspect foul play.
Law Enforcement is saying that one of the girls actually took video on her iPhone. They say it was right before she was murdered.
It's amazing that we have a video, we have a still photograph, we have sound, and we don't know who this person is.
It could be half of the white males in Carroll County.
To the killer who may be in this room, we likely have interviewed you. We know that this is about power to you, and you want to know what we know. And one day, you will.
This is Down the Hill, the Delphi murders. I'm Andrew Iden.
And I'm Barbara McDonald.
And we're here in the writer's room at CNN Center. And Barb, as we look at this case and kind of where we are in the timeline, here's what we know. 2 girls, Abigail Williams and Liberty German, 13 and 14, have been murdered. We know that these girls went missing late in the afternoon. And we also know that their bodies were found just a short distance from that bridge on some private property. And at this point, there's a lot of action at the crime scene. It's a little bit chaotic. There's state police, local police, sheriff's department, fire department. So it's getting a little chaotic, as you might imagine.
And it's a gruesome scene. Many of those officers told us that it's something they're not going to be able to unsee. And this is where the questions are beginning. Where were these girls killed? How were they killed? And why? Why did this even happen? We've spent months looking into this. We've made several trips to Delphi. We have talked to dozens of people. And we're not trying to solve this case. What we're trying to do is really understand it. And to understand, can this be solved? What actually happened out there in those woods that day? And who did it?
And yeah, it's important to note that point about not trying to solve this, because there's a lot of complexities here. You know, we've talked about a lot of things that over the course of the story, as it unravels, some things are clear, some things aren't, some things that are blurry then become clear. The things that are clear then become blurry again. There's a lot of moving parts. So, Barb, it's important to note that at this point in our story, this is when everything changes. You have a community that has been traumatized. You have families that are traumatized. And at the same time, you have multiple law enforcement agencies that are beginning a double murder investigation in earnest.
And the other thing changing is Valentine's Day. It's February 14th. That'll never be the same.
And so as we're trying to make sense of this story, this is when that starts for everybody else in Delphi too. Part 1. We didn't win this one.
I'm trying to think of what the word is, because it's not exasperation. It's not confusion. I don't know. It's hard to describe. It's a shock, and that's probably the best way to describe it. It's something that was unexpected. You knew it was a possibility that the girls would be out there dead.
So, Barb, we've talked about a lot of the things involved in this case and the factors that make it stand out, unlike others. And one of the things that really makes this thing different from others is that there are family members that are virtually at the crime scene when the girls are found.
In organized search parties out there looking for Abby and Libby when...
See, that's something that we didn't know about earlier, is that the families were involved in the search party and they were there when they were found. How tragic is that?
There's a discovery. And as we pick up our story, Becky and Kelsey are both out at the crime scene in those organized search parties. We have other family members at the command center. Fire Chief Daryl Sterrett is at the firehouse that has become this command center, and he's taking care of his fire crews who are out at the scene.
And this is like a 40-minute window of time where for a lot of these family members, not only is it the worst possible news they're ever going to hear, but I would imagine a lot of them look at their lives before this 40 minutes and after this 40 minutes.
Changed everything.
So that starts with Libby's sister, Kelsey, who had just learned they'd been discovered.
I that moment, I wanted to run across the creek and get to them. I was like, they're alive. I know they are. They have to be. Until somebody said something else, and I knew that they weren't. In that moment, I was with another lady who had actually lost her brother in high school, and she just hugged me until I calmed down.
Kelsey's grandmother, Becky Patty, is also searching along the trails, and Kelsey's grandfather, Mike Patty, is at the fire station. And here's the call come in from searchers.
It said they may have found the girls, out near the high bridge. And so immediately I just went and jumped in my truck and drove straight out there. And that's when I come up on Becky, and most of my family was already there. And it wasn't good. It wasn't a good, we all knew at that point that they'd been found, but, because, again, we had some friends that actually were in a search party that found them. And I talked to him a little bit, and, they've been found. It's almost like disbelief, you don't want to believe this. I remember getting Becky and saying, okay, it's no good for us here. I remember leaving and remember stopping and seeing friends of mine who were in search parties just lined up along the road. And then when I talked to the buddy of mine who was in the search party, found them, something horrible had happened. I knew that.
I mean, can you imagine this small town? Because that's what's so tragic about these things is, if it's a small area, most chance people are gonna know these people, these victims. They're gonna, they would have had some interaction with them. They know the family. There's kids to go to school with these girls. All this stuff, and they're out there searching for these two young females. And then you run across them and you find them. And you're like, your whole life just changes in an instant. So therefore, it's no longer a missing case. It all of a sudden becomes a homicide.
Let's put it that way.
At the same time, Tobe Lesenby, sheriff of Carroll County, gets the news.
So when you heard they were found, how did your mind process that? What did you think must have happened?
Well, you're right. I mean, being that close to a stream that can be unpredictable sometimes, and not having those initial answers, we're thinking, okay, did they drown? Where specifically were they found? All those types of questions that hadn't been answered at that point. And of course, being in law enforcement, we had to, at least in our own minds, have that thought run through our minds that, okay, were they, was there criminal activity afoot here? So yeah, there were just a large amount of various unanswered questions at that stage.
And when did you find out that this looks like foul play?
It wasn't long after that initial call, actually. I'm going to say within, as I recall, within the hour of getting the initial one. And just put a whole different twist on the whole scenario for us at that stage.
And what does that do to these men gathered at the firehouse? You said that with that first call, you could hear a pin drop as it becomes known that this is looking like a crime. Is it still quiet?
As I recall, yes. I think that, that first hour to allow it to set in, I think that first hour, yes, there was, for me, it was disbelief. But eventually, not long after that, then our instinct.
We just got an Amber Alert for a missing child out of Austin, Texas. And I closed it, so I don't know exactly what else it said. If I could find it again, I'll read it out loud.
Things in our training kicked in, and we went into investigative mode.
It quickly becomes clear this is different. This will need more experience, more tools, and more expertise than Carroll County has.
And I know that if I put out the call, or even Doug Carter, or even the FBI were to put out that call, hey, we need this, and this, that someone's going to respond to us, because that's the way our profession works.
Doug Carter. At the start of each chapter of this podcast, you'll hear his voice because he's one of the key people in this case. He's the superintendent of the Indiana State Police, and his part of the story really starts here. He's about to launch a full-scale double murder investigation, and it's clear when you talk to him that this is the case. He will solve it. It's a mission he's hell-bent on finishing.
I just received a phone call that we believe we found the two bodies of the two girls. We didn't know who they were exactly at the time. I immediately left. I immediately left downtown Indianapolis and drove to Delphi, to the crime scene. And we had a significant response there. We had aviation assets on the way. Every kind of specialty that the ISP has to offer to the local community. So we responded with all we had.
Also leaving Indianapolis is Sergeant Kim Riley. He's a state police spokesman, and in a few hours will be giving the first press briefing.
On the way up, I was making calls to some of our investigators, trying to find out what they knew. And basically, most of them hadn't even got to the scene either. When you realize that the state police post is about 30 minutes away from that location, I realized most of them probably were running with lights and siren to get up there as soon as possible, because it was an emergency situation. I mean, it was something that here we got two young girls who've been murdered. We didn't know how, we didn't know why, didn't have any answers at that point in time.
So that's why I find it kind of weird when people, if you haven't heard about that other case, like I continue to tell you about the Idaho 4 case, you might check into it. It's kind of a doozy. So if you haven't been mindful of that case, or just kind of ignored it a little bit, you might check into it. But kind of like that with that case, I heard a lot of things being discussed about early awareness of the case going on. So, it's interesting that, when law enforcement arrives, it just puts a different spin on things. You have, especially with this case, it had like a 1.5 mile crime scene, and they're going to talk about that. So it's different than just, a couple bedrooms, or, outside in a parking lot, or, in a closed area in a convenience store or something like this. This is 1.5 miles of evidentiary placement, so you have a lot to cover, and you want to make sure that, there's been people searching. So therefore, you don't want to contaminate the crime scene, so I'm sure this was a hard one to contain. And I don't know the answer to that, Randy. I really don't. I don't understand it. It's cool. I mean, and also it's the case. A lot of times people are not going to tune in for any other case than Idaho 4. And that's why I'm kind of limiting that, because, I don't have anything new to really talk about. So this is coming up. This court case is coming up. The court trial is coming up. That's why I'm kind of going back and educating the sub that want to know about this case. So when the court case does hit and the trial starts, if I broadcast any of it, they'll know exactly what's going on. They won't be hearing it for the first time.
Anna Williams is Abby's mother. She spent most of the morning at the firehouse waiting for any word about her daughter. And then the word comes.
So Pastor Todd found me and said, well, we need to go upstairs. And before the words came out of his mouth, I knew that this was not a happy thing. I didn't know all the details then as to what was going on, but it definitely wasn't positive. I remember that.
Do you remember his words?
That's kind of blurry. It was, they believe that they have found the girls and they're not with us. And I remember after that, I was so upset because the last 3 years that she had been at church camp, she kept asking to get baptized. And I said, no, I want you to do it when we're all here together as a family. And that was the first thing I said. I said, never got it done. He's like, Anna, your daughter gave her heart to the Lord and she is with him today. And you know that. And from that moment on, head to toe, it went whoosh. And I just knew no matter what, and my girl was okay. And I've stayed with that this is temporary.
More than 200 miles away, Libby's mom, Carrie Timmons, is headed for Delphi when her phone rings.
And my brother called me and he said, Carrie, I'm seeing some really disturbing things on Facebook. So my brother says, you need to call Becky. And I refused, just flat, no, I'm not calling her. I think now that was like, if I don't call her, it's not true. It's not. So I called Kelsey. I don't know why in my mind that was any different, but I called Kelsey. She didn't answer, and so I kept calling. I probably called her 10 times, no answer. And so I had jumped in the car and I was on my way to the gas station. Fine, if they're not going to call me, I'm going. I'm on my way. And I was probably 4 or 5 blocks away from the gas station when my phone rang, and it was Kelsey's number that popped up. So I'm expecting when I answer the phone to hear Kelsey say, Mom, we found her. And it was Derek. And Derek and I hadn't really talked much at that point. So it was kind of a shock for him to be on the phone. And he said, Carrie, they've found the girls. And I had like a split second of, oh, thank God. But he didn't say anything else. And I was like, are they okay? He said, no. And at that point, I think I was like primal evil just came out of me and screaming, no. And I said, are they alive?
See, I don't know why in that other case that, you might find interesting if you haven't checked it out already. I don't understand why in this one, the family members are talking. I get the law enforcement and all that. They can't talk because of the gag order, but the family members are talking on this one and they're giving their reaction to the news and they're giving their statements. So it's not like, people are making stuff up for them. They're talking for themselves. So I think some cases have a better understanding because people are more viable to talk about it rather than to hide and not talk. I don't understand that other case regarding all that. But this one, I'm glad that the mom, the grandfather, and the grandma chose to be talking to these individuals because we get a human portion of that when they're able to tell their own story of the day that they found out about their loved ones.
And he said no. And I don't know how I made it to the gas station because I was just hysterical. People were staring at me. And I just wanted to disappear. I wanted it to all go away. I'd pulled up on the wrong side of the gas pump. And here I was outside of the pump screaming, and why can't I get the nozzle in the thing because it wasn't even there.
I remember I was on my lunch break and I was coming back from work and my boss had stopped me at the door and she was like, I think you need to go home.
Kelsey and Libby's cousin, Mercedes Mowdy, she goes by Sadie, finds out too. She's just a few years older and grew up with the girls.
And I was like, for what? And she's like, well, the news said. And so I rushed back home. I picked up my cousin and we went to the fire station. Man, it was just a hot mess. I mean, we all were a hot mess. And then they came in and said that they had found 2 bodies. They didn't say who they were or what they were. And then that's kind of when the reality sunk in. Like something bad had happened.
Meanwhile, Becky Patty is in a search party.
A friend of ours was in also one of the search groups that was across the creek, and he saw something. So he took his phone and zoomed in, and it was a tie-dye shirt, and he knew what Libby wore. And his wife, she come back and she said they found the girls. Well, I was kind of excited, you know, and then it hit me. I said, are they okay? She wouldn't answer. So I knew that they found them. So we hurried up and jumped in our cars and went back to the trailhead, and one of the firemen was there, and I said, you need to take me to Libby now. You need to take me. She's going to need me. They wouldn't let us go close. They wouldn't take me. So that's when he came up. He says, we need to go to the truck. And while we were sitting in the truck, the coroner's van come driving by. That's when you realize this is real. This isn't a mistake. That they're really just hurt. And they couldn't say it was them, but everybody knew it was.
Anna Williams is still at the firehouse.
And I was like, well, maybe it's not them. And that lasted like 10 seconds. I'm like, no. Who else would it be? I mean, we knew. I knew. But there was still that 10, 15 seconds where you just hope. And then, you know, my closest friends and coworkers were sitting outside. And I walked down there and like, oh, there you are. We were looking for you. And she said, what's going on? I said, they found him. She's like, oh, thank God. And I just shook my head and she was like, oh no. And we just stood there. I mean, we were just in shock. It just didn't make any sense.
I mean, you know, granted, compared to the other case that I keep talking about, that's kind of cool a little bit, you know, it's all right. You know, I think one thing that goes unnoticed with the families whenever they hear tragic news is your mind just goes to a different place. Like, I've shared on here that one of my close uncles got murdered viciously, you know, and when we got the phone call in the middle of the night, it's almost like I had to be strong for my aunt, you know, and she broke down. She started crying, and I was kind of like, I was able to disassociate my feelings back then. So I just kind of took myself out of the situation and just kind of was trying to be strong for her. And anytime you find out some bad news like this, it's never great. It's never like you're gonna know how to handle it. It's not like you're gonna handle it, you know, like textbook or anything like that. You know, most of the time your mind's gonna shut off. You're not gonna know what you're saying. You're not gonna know what you're doing. Just like that lady just said, she pulled up into a gas station in the wrong lane and was trying to pump gas, and she couldn't figure out why she couldn't put the gas in her truck because her gas tank wasn't on that side. You know, so whenever you find out something tragic and people automatically say, well, you should have acted like this, or you should have done this, or you should have done that, you know, who are they to decide how you should react when tragedy strikes so close to home? Like I always say, until it happens to you, then you're going to realize that you're not going to be doing it by the textbook. You're going to be hysterical. You're going to be crying. There's going to be people crying. And, there's going to be people yelling. There's going to be people throwing things. They're going to, they're dealing with it the best they can. And to say that, well, you should rush right over to a crime scene or something like that. Bro, have you ever been so hysterical? Do you think that you can drive that distance calm, cool, and collective after hearing a family member had just been killed? Let's be real here. Let's be real. I don't believe that anybody in this chat could do it. I don't think you could be calm enough to be able to drive. And if you could, kudos to you. But I don't believe that everybody deals with these situations the same way. To give grace to all these families that have loved ones in this case as well, Man, they just found out these two little girls are no longer around.
The search is over. Fire Chief Daryl Sterrett is dealing with the gravity of telling hundreds of volunteers that they're no longer needed.
Of course, you have to stand like a stone and you have to keep it together while you tell 200 people that we didn't win this one. And I came back inside our little command circle downstairs and I had to go into our utility closet to collect myself. But then again, you're only allowed so much time before you have to come back out and be who you're supposed to be and keep it together. Because if you lose it, then everybody around you is going to lose it. And I waited because I knew my guys would be trickling back in eventually. And I did not want them to decompress in front of the public. And I wanted to keep the public away from them. I didn't know which of my guys had been to the scene, but I knew they had all been out there.
Was it one of your guys that found the scene?
I was told that it was a private citizen. That's all I was told. But I know now, after the fact, that a couple of my guys had been there shortly after the discovery. And that's why I wanted to be here when they came back, because I know what they do when they're stressed out. And I did not want that to happen with as much public as we had here. And I wanted to keep them separate from the public. And the public, they mean no disrespect. They mean no harm. They don't understand what these guys actually face. And if you touch that nerve, that happens. So a couple of my guys were trickling in, and one of my most loyal, hardened, that guy came in, and I put myself between him and the crowd, and he kind of started talking. I said, just go to the other side of the engine, go to the other side of the engine. And we went over to the other side of the engine, which I had roped off just for them. And he started taking the boots off and stuff, and I just said, I don't even remember what the comment was, but it alluded to the fact that it was not a good end. He didn't know. And it's hard to see a guy that tough and that strong break down and just lose it. But these guys are all hard.
Barb,
he discussed it perfectly right there. I've never heard it stated that perfect. He said, even big tough guys in the public at the public, they're going to be them. They're going to ask questions. They're going to be making statements. And you are one of the people that found these bodies. You may have known the families. You may have known the kids. And he sounds like they get very aggressive when they are trying to decompress, which is understandable. You know, to shield them from the public is a smart move on his part because you just never know who you're going to, somebody's going to say the wrong thing, be insensitive, and you're going to lose it. Not because you intend to, but because how dare they at this moment? You get what I'm saying?
We're back here in the writer's room at CNN Center. And, you know, thinking about where we are in the story, there's a couple conversations we had that I remember distinctly. And one of those was with Mike Patty. In the garage of his home, we sat there and had a good 2-hour interview with him. And I remember asking him about when they found out that the girls had been found, what was their next move? Did they go to church? Did they go home? He had to think about it for a second and he couldn't really remember. And he said something to the effect of how, I don't know, we just, you know, I don't really know. And so it really is kind of a microcosm of where we are here for the families because it's a really blurry moment.
And it's going to stay blurry for them for a little while. But the group that needs really laser sharp focus right now is the investigators, because they are jumping right in, both feet into this double murder homicide investigation.
There's a killer on the loose. They're going to find this guy. The clock's ticking.
Part 2, 300 feet away.
At one point, where the state police had taken over our fire station, we could barely get trucks out if we needed to, and we had conversations, and we got that figured out, and I think they ended up with a pretty good infrastructure to be able to conduct the investigation.
Drew, you mentioned the clock is ticking. First 48 hours are significant in any murder investigation.
Any law enforcement agency will tell you that if they're going to make an arrest, the first 48 hours is the most pivotal time.
And so, yeah, the clock is ticking. They are jumping into this. And they're trying to make sense of this crime scene that they know where the girls were found on private property. They don't know at this point, they're going to learn soon enough, that that crime scene stretches about a quarter of a mile back to the bridge. So they're dealing with a very, very large area here that they have to start going through with a fine-tooth comb, essentially.
Leaves, hills, water. Yeah, this is not an easy crime scene to manage. And so the other thing to note is that logistically, getting out there with the resources that are required isn't easy either. And so, you know, one of the folks with the ISP that we spoke with was even talking about, from a logistical standpoint, the cell towers in the area couldn't really handle the bandwidth of cell phones, police scanners, communication equipment. So they had to bring in mobile command centers just to handle that infrastructure. And so the crime scene's complex. The logistics are complex. It's rural Indiana. So there's a lot of hurdles they have to clear here.
And that's what's going on when the superintendent of state police gets on scene.
I saw fear in people's eyes, not even anger at that point, because again, we didn't confirm that it was Abby and Libby. Pretty obvious, though. I think most people knew that it was. Horror. The things that I'm thinking in my mind is, how do we sustain this? What assets do we need that aren't here? Once they're here, how do we keep them? And then the logistics behind that, just how my mind thinks. I had an immediate conversation with my boss, the governor of the state of Indiana, Eric Holcomb, and I knew he would say what he did, but anything that community needs, the answer is, of course, yes. The law enforcement response, the local law enforcement response, I knew that since it's a very rural area, that it was going to require a tremendous response from state police. I know what their limitations are. and it's nothing against them. They do the best they can, and they've done a really nice job. But they have 2 detectives in the whole county, so we jumped in.
One of those men jumping in is Public Information Officer Sergeant Kim Riley. Sergeant Riley knows this area. He'd patrolled it earlier in his career. His first hurdle is trying to understand the scope of the crime scene and his first impressions.
I saw a lot of people that with blank looks on their face, people that are just wondering, why did this happen? Or who would do such a thing as this? When I was talking to the officers that had got to the scene and I was trying to get some information, they were looking the same way. The way the girls were found, how they were found, what had happened to them. It was just a lot of things were going through their minds and just trying to get to figure out the crime scene. You know, is it here? Is it there? How much of a crime scene do we have here? And that was one of the questions that was being discussed too. You know, how big of a crime scene have we got? What are we dealing with? How much evidence have we got here to deal with? Those are things that were going through the minds. I know the investigators, the crime scene technicians had already arrived, so they were starting to look at the crime scene to see what they could do.
So once the girls were found, you said a couple hundred people had been out there looking for them. So the girls are found, you begin to secure off that area. What is that process like, and how do you get those people out of there?
Well, actually, we don't want to get them too far out because we want to make sure and keep them close by, because first of all, we have to interview them to see what they found, what they did at the scene, get any pertinent information from them that we can get, their name, address, phone number, so we can get, later on in the investigation, if we need more information or if we need, whatever from them, we can get a hold of them and get that information. They basically all gave us a statement, which is basically protocol on any type of a crime scene that somebody would walk up on. And that's basically what we did with the people that were there. And then we just try to figure out at that point in time, how big is this crime scene going to be? I mean, if you've never been there, you got to remember we're in Indiana, we're in central Indiana, and the ravines are not deep here, but we do have ravines, small hills. And there was basically a creek that ran through there, right, real close to the crime scene. It was down in the lower gully, I guess you'd call it, where the bodies were found. And there was 2 hills on each side and plus one on the other side of the creek. So, trying to figure out where did they come from? How did they get here? Which way did the suspect or suspects go? Those are all things that they're trying to figure out to see how large of a crime scene they got to make.
I don't know about you guys, but I'm a very visual person, so I'm more perplexed right now because he's giving the demographics. So in my mind, I'm able to picture it compared to if they were showing me a video and talking about it, because I would be focusing on everything but what they're saying. So that's why I'm enjoying this a lot. Like, I wish they would have done this with the other case. I mean, of all the stuff that's been romanticized or dramatized, I wish they would have done this. I mean, I went into, there is a audio cast on the other case, but it's not as detailed as this. It has a lot of professionals, but you can tell that they're kind of biased in their opinions on the case. And I don't know if that's going to play something into the end result because they understand how the case went along. But this one, I don't know, it already has me hooked.
And the crime scene begins on the bridge?
Well, the crime scene originally started where we found the bodies, because that was all the crime scene we knew at that point in time. As we found evidence and looked into things, found the phone, that's when we've realized that the crime scene actually did start at the bridge. So now we have to back up even more to bring that bridge into the crime scene. So now we're moving from the crime scene from maybe third of an acre. Now we're talking, because it's about a quarter of a mile from where the bodies were found to where the video was taken. And so trying to figure out, okay, where did they walk? And you got to remember, you had 400 or 500 people that started looking for these girls the night before. So we had to deal with that, because we know
there's a lot
people,
of tracks out
right?
there.
A lot of tracks, cigarette butts. Believe it or not, this kind of disgusting, but you had spit. People would urinate. Because they don't have time to go back, so they go hide in the woods to go to the bathroom, that kind of stuff. So we had to deal with all that. And most people don't even think of things like that. But when you're trying to process a crime scene, you got to remember it's the spring of the year or late winter. In February, you got all the leaves on the ground. We basically had to turn every leaf over from the crime scene all the way up the whole thing. And I don't mean we turned every one, but I mean, it was just that dramatic of a crime scene. That's what took so long.
That's a time when thoughtful reason must kick in, not emotion, because we know we have one time to do this right.
Superintendent Doug Carter.
That was a bit of a challenge to try and calm or take a step back from this. We brought in, I think, 5, maybe 6 crime scene technicians. And our job at that point was to build a fence around this, not a literal one figuratively, and do everything that we needed to do to support them. The crime scene was very complicated.
Compared to other investigations you do, where does it?
Well, I think it's commonly known that it includes the Monon High Bridge. It includes the trailhead. We've been there. It's a cool little bench there to sit on and reflect if you haven't done that.
Absolutely. We just did it the other day.
Yeah, I spent some time there too. It's nice, isn't it? Very reflective. So everywhere from the trailhead on. That's all I can say about the crime scene.
So we kind of got a break, I guess you'd say. We didn't have to deal with a snowstorm. We didn't have to deal with, it didn't rain. So we were able to process that and get it done as quickly as we could, but it still took a long time to do.
Are you confident that you recovered everything that could have been recovered there?
I believe we done the best we could do. I'm not going to say we didn't miss anything. I mean, we're human beings. We're going to miss things. But overall, I mean, the way they did it, one guy would check over somebody else's work to see if there was anything they felt that they missed. And so it was, I mean, it wasn't just one crime scene technician doing this. Our people were there. We had other departments that had people there. It was a joint effort in collecting this. And then there was people that came in after that just to make sure we covered everything. They started at sunrise and didn't quit till way past 9-10 o'clock. So it wasn't like they weren't there. And then we had guards or other troopers and sheriff's departments that helped secure the scenes when they were gone, so that we didn't have somebody walking in and, trying to get pictures or do something. I mean, it was well secured.
And you said this was an area you had patrolled as a trooper earlier in your career. You're familiar with the area. You know some of these people. You're a father and a grandfather in addition to being a cop. What is going through your head as you're out there?
Well, I didn't go up to the crime scene. There was one ridge you could actually go to, and I stood on that ridge and I could see the crime scene. It was still probably 200 to 300 feet away from me. I could see the crime scene, but I didn't feel comfortable. First of all, I didn't want to go to the crime scene. I didn't want to be with somebody that would contaminate something, and that's one of the things why we keep people out. But just looking at those 2 young girls laying there on the ground, it brought memories of my daughters when they were that age and how I would feel if I was their father. It was very emotional for me. And like I said, I didn't know their parents at that time, but I knew a lot of people in Delphi and a lot of people that were in the search party. I knew a lot of those people. But, it'd been, like I said, it'd probably been 15, 20 years since I've been there. So it was kind of I don't want to use the word reunion, but it was a time where they would interact with me and I was interacting with them to try to get their feelings of what their feelings were and what I was going through. And I was from a small town also. So knowing how a small town works in central United States made a big difference on how I reacted and how I was feeling what could feel their pain, but didn't know their pain, if that makes sense. And that was tough, knowing that.
I don't know. I've thought many a times, like early on in my life, I thought about being a police officer because I wanted to be a profiler, a forensic profiler. And I'm kind of glad I didn't now, because listening to all this stuff, I mean, you can only see so much bad stuff where it starts to take a toll on you emotionally, physically. Because when you're seeing the worst of the worst every day, can you imagine I hear the worst. I don't see it. So, it still takes a toll on me. But seeing it would be a total different monster in itself. What do y'all think about that? Do you think the police officers have a hard job? Them, the investigators, all the people involved in the investigation, they see this stuff day in, day out. You think they have a hard job?
Basically, we're going to make this, it's going to be short and sweet. We don't have that much at this point in time. Basically, what we've got, we have found 2 bodies in Deer Creek, about a mile east of town. We are investigating this as a crime scene. We suspect foul play. We have not made positive identification of the 2 bodies, so we're not going to be releasing any information on them at this point in time. We've got the Indiana State Police is assisting the Carroll County Sheriff's Department and the Delphi City Police Department in the investigation here. We also have the FBI Crime Scene Investigation Group here out of Indianapolis. And one thing the family asked us to do is to thank all the communities around Delphi and the people here in Delphi for assisting in attempting to locate these the 2 young children that were missing earlier. They just wanted to say thank you to those people, and thank you. They were just wanted to express their gratitude toward the hard work that was done in helping search for these children.
Sergeant Kim Riley doesn't say the girls' names in that press conference, but everyone knows. And as the announcement makes its way across town, Abby and Libby's friends and teachers are in class. They're about to find out. Pastor Todd Ladd is learning his services are needed there too.
I received a phone call from the school corporation asking for me to have my staff come over and help with the school. I responded.
The school was in session on Tuesday.
School's in session.
Monday they had been out when the girls went missing, but on Tuesday it was a normal day with school.
Yes. However, on that day, I responded and said, I can't be there. I'm with families right now, but I'll send my staff over. Interestingly enough, my staff had already gone over. They'd already gathered at the middle school library. And interestingly enough, because we're a small, close-knit town, many other counselors were already there. Many other pastors were already there at the school to be able to talk with kids and encourage them. So that was the next step to make sure that piece was covered. The other piece was a bit of care for the media as well. At that point in time, where do we have a press conference? What do we do? So we talked about having that downstairs in the city building, helping share with the media, here's where you'll set up, here's where the police will set, and it's just kind of things are happening all at once.
Erica Gibson, you'll remember, is good friends with both Abby and Libby. And if you saw Erica and Libby together, you'd swear they were twins. On the afternoon of the 14th, she's sitting in class waiting for news.
Who pulled you out of class?
Our counselor pulled us out of class to tell us that they found them.
And what did the counselor say to you?
She didn't say anything. She pulled us out. We were in health class 6 hour. She pulled us out and we walked into the office, and my dad's standing there, because he was in the search party. He was standing there in his clothes, and then her mom was in her scrubs, and we just knew. They didn't even have to say anything.
See, all this stuff would have been beneficial in that other case. These are the pieces of the puzzles that people speculate on. These are the pieces of the puzzles where they speculate on the people involved. If they had a podcast like this, there would be hardly any speculation. There would be speculation, but you'd be focused on just the crime. And they're not discussing anything about the crime scene. So they're speaking freely. They're giving you firsthand information about what was done during school, what was, said, how people were acting, things like that. These are the things that people are filling in the blank because they don't have that information. So if those people that, are being thrown into the mix and all this stuff, if they were just to come out and say, well, this is what I was doing, this is how I felt, this is what I saw, they're not telling anything about the crime. So therefore, there's no reason for them not to be able to speak on it, just like these individuals are. And I think that's why I enjoyed this so much so far, is because there's no room for speculation. This is real firsthand information.
We just knew. And so then they took us to the principal's office to calm us down.
And what did that feel like for you?
Heartbroken. It was terrible. It was something I never wish on anybody at all. Especially afterwards, we went into the library and a bunch of the kids in our grade were there and they were just sobbing, and we were having a circle talking to pastors and stuff like that already. And some of the kids boys I've never seen show any emotion. They were distraught and it was really sad, really bad.
How were the adults? Did they seem as heartbroken as you?
Yes. One of my favorite teachers came in a little bit after. After students got called out of her class and stuff, she actually asked if someone could watch her class so she could be in the library with us, because she was our 8th grade teacher at that, and Libby's. But she was the math bowl coach too. So she was also close to her in that way. And she just came in and we just all sat and hugged her. And I mean, it was terrible the next few days, really bad. We had dogs come in and that was nice. And
you mean like comfort animals? Right?
Yes. We had the support at the school. We really did.
No one had specifically told me. I just kind of figured it out based on clues around the hallway when kids were crying.
Cynthia Rossi is also a friend of Abby and Libby. We met her in the last chapter. And when you talk to her today, it's clear she had to grow up quickly. And this is where it starts.
They had started taking kids and putting them into the library, and they had counselors there. And I knew when I saw all the different visitor passes and people crying and school officials walking around all over the place, I knew that it probably hadn't ended well.
And did you ask anybody what was happening or what happened next for you?
I didn't ask anybody because I just kind of had this feeling. And then I went into the library with my friends and we just talked with some of our teachers about them.
And were there pastors there at that point?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what's going through your mind? Finding out that your friends are missing, now they've been found, and it's not good.
I think it was just, I am the type of person where I want to be there for other people. So I was just mostly consoling my friends and making sure that they were okay. And I kind of regret that because it's like the analogy that if you have a cup full of water and you just keep pouring to other people, you don't have any left for yourself. So I was so worried about other people, and I wish I would have taken that time to, sit down and ask myself, are you okay? Are you ready to deal with this, rather than just talking to people that whole night. I stayed up and talked to friends and their family members and my family members, where I wish that I would just let myself deal with it and just take some time away from my phone, away from social media, away from everyone, and just decompress and let myself deal with it.
And I said, listen, you're babies and you don't know how to deal with this because I don't know how to deal with this.
That's Christine Lang. She's one of Abby and Libby's teachers, and she's dealt with a lot of things in her classroom, but never this.
I said, absolutely, no one. You don't have a class in college that talks about what you do when a student passes away from any reason. And you and I both know it's just out of order. We shouldn't bury our babies or our grandbabies. And so everyone was just trying to love each other.
The text that you got that they had been found, did you get the notification that they had passed from something so horrific, or was it they've been found and they passed away?
It was just, she was not out there. I think a family member of hers was helping, and no. And I will say, I don't think we really knew, nor do we know all the details, and I don't want to, and that's not my business. But then I think.
Did you hear what she just said? I don't think we know all the details, and I don't want to. None of our business. That's how I feel about certain things, about certain cases. Some of that stuff's not my business.
By the time people were gathering in the library, that it had come to be known that there was some wrongdoing. I don't know that the kids or even I was aware that day of how horrible it was.
It is hearing these kids and these teachers talk about learning of Abby and Libby's death. I am reminded that there is a very big difference between, them learning that they're dead and learning that it was murder and what goes with that.
And how shocking that must be that two of your friends disappear and now they're dead. And even though we haven't heard the police officially say that this is Abby and Libby that have been found, everybody knows that. Everybody's operating at this point as if it is Abby and Libby.
Why don't you think they announced them officially early on?
I'm not entirely sure. I think, though, that they realize they're dealing with something different here and they're going by the book. The bodies need to be taken to Terre Haute for the autopsy. And that's usually when the official ID process comes about.
Well, and while that ID still needs to be made, the investigation is kind of kicking off here with multiple jurisdictions and agencies, because Carroll County and the sheriff's office there will probably be the first to tell you we don't necessarily have the resources or the experience to handle
Or the budget.
to handle something like that.
Exactly. And Indiana State Police have access to so many more resources around the state and even outside of the state. They have the governor's office on board. And so we'll see that sort of change of hands with this investigation. And I think that having all of those agencies there that early is also symbolic of we're dealing with something different here. This is not a routine case that's being investigated.
Something entirely different that the town is also learning and trying to determine how long before they take their first step forward.
Well, I'm going to pause it right there. There's still probably about 10, 15 minutes on this chapter, but I want to do another chapter, finish this one up and do another chapter this evening. I got some things to do right now, but I'll probably try to start at about 8:30 p.m. Central Time, so we can finish this one up. If anything, finish this one up and then start on another chapter. I'm just so amazed how good this production is. Like this is one of the best ones I've heard of all the podcasts. I mean, not all podcasts are great, but there's some. When you find a great one like this one is, you're like, man, this is amazing because it keeps your interest. You're not zoning off. You're not trying to, worry about what you're going to say next and, stuff like that. Yeah. If you guys can do some recruiting too, if you know anybody that's followed this case that maybe you're friends with them in another chat or something, maybe invite them in tonight, because a lot of people don't have my page probably with the notifications on. There's a lot of replay crew. I mean, there's a lot of replay crew. And to be fair, also, it's like there's not a lot of arguing in here. So, I don't mind if people talk their opinions or their thoughts. Just, when they come in here, sometimes they come in here and they're wanting to take over the show. They're wanting to take over and tell everybody exactly what we already know because we watch the same channels. So it's not like when people come in here and they tell us certain things, heck, I've probably already heard that 3 or 4 times. So because I've watched the same channel that the chat watches, I watch the YouTubers. I mean, I know a lot of YouTubers say, well, I don't watch other creators. Well, I'm not like that. I watch other creators because, how are you going to learn if you're the only person that's putting stuff out there? You know what I mean? So, that's what I do. I mean, I'm not so one-dimensional that I'm above watching anybody else, Well, I appreciate that, Aquarius. I appreciate that a lot, because um, it's not that I want the numbers or anything like that. It just, I believe that whenever you find something that people can latch onto and learn from, it's great to share it with the world. You know what I mean? Like, there's so much stuff that people get angry and fight about and argue about because this one supposedly lied about this or said this or misquoted this. Well, on this podcast, I mean, you could be one that you could say that these people that they're interviewing are lying. The grandfather, the cousin, the schoolmate, all those people. You could be one of those that say, "Well, they're just lying for the interview." But I mean, come on, man. After a while, not everybody is a liar. Not everybody is out to discredit police or anything like that. You know what I mean? Um, I don't know. I hope I present or commentate a good show for you guys. And if you watch this on the replay crew, if you hit the like button, if anything, just for my effort, you know what I mean? Just for my effort, nothing more than that. Because I'm not asking for anything from you guys. I just like everybody else, we put a little bit of effort and a little bit of thought into this. Not like we just get up here and try to wing it without an understanding of certain things. And also, as you guys are learning this, I myself am learning it also with you. So it's not like, you know, I'm hearing or I'm reading something that you guys are learning for the first time because most of the time I'm learning it for the first time. So um I hope you guys enjoyed that. I got to go take care of some business. You guys have an awesome day. I'm not going to end it the way I usually do. I got to get out of here fairly quickly. So, gonna have the maestro cue the music. Okay, I know you already dig it, or you wouldn't be here. Y'all have a good evening. I'll try to get back to you tonight. If for some reason I can't, I will definitely upload the rest of the part tomorrow. Okay. Y'all have a safe Columbus Day, and I'll talk to you soon.